And so as Brigham Young looks over the town, he says, this will never do. This is not a light unto the world. In other words, this is a town, other than the Nauvoo Temple and a few other large structures under construction, he says that this is not a light unto the world. His conclusion was this. He said, Joseph Smith prophesied that this town would be a light unto the world, and in the same kind of prophecy time, that Joseph also said the saints would be driven to the Rocky Mountains, and there they would become a mighty people. So as Brigham Young looks at it, and now persecution is coming on the saints, his conclusion was, we will go west, we will get our wagons ready. He said, but we will at the very same time complete the light unto the world. As a result, he now changes the name of the town again. So notice it's the same piece of ground, but this time he changes the town to City of, anybody got it? Yes. City of Joseph. Okay. So he says to the saints, he said, before we leave to go west, he said, I want you to build your memory, which in essence is, I want you to build your testimony of Joseph Smith to be left then for generations to look on. And that as you prepare to leave, you leave behind in literally brick your memory of Joseph Smith, and you will dedicate whatever you have left behind as this is your memory of Joseph. Well, now, you could imagine for me, you know, I live in an okay house in Provo that was built in the 1950s, and so it's 60 years old. And you'd say, if somebody said to me, before you leave that neighborhood, I would like you to build your memory of Joseph. Suddenly, guess what would happen to my house? Boom! That one goes. I'd try and buy out all my neighbors. You know, I'd be like, come on, go on. I would get, you know, the big bricks. I'd do columns that would just be magnificent, because this is what I think about Joseph Smith. Well, suddenly it was the same kind of thing now in the city of Joseph. Literally overnight, suddenly there are 16 brickyards that are now in place. And people are rushing to that. No, I want that brick. No, that's my load. You can even see fights over the brick because everybody is now building their memory of Joseph. Now, the one I think I probably like the best, Wilford Woodruff wanted to have the biggest memory of Joseph Smith. But how could he possibly have his house bigger than John Taylor's and Brigham Young? In other words, and so he concluded that no one would, in essence, have to know, but what he would do, he wanted to put the most brick in. And he would check with the brick man. Anybody picked up more bricks than me? No, not yet. Okay, I think so-and-so. Okay, wait. And so as a result, every wall inside the house, he made 8 bricks thick. You know, and you look and you go, wow, Wilford, you are putting in like a fortress, because he wants his memory to be the biggest. Now, okay, what's the impact? The impact goes like this. Suddenly Nauvoo, which at the death of Joseph, pretty much a log cabin town, suddenly 2 years later, you look at City of Joseph and shop, barn, the house, when they finished, all dedicated to the memory of who? Joseph Smith. So you'd say by 1846, what is the largest landmass in the United States dedicated to the memory of any one man? And you'd say, well, it's City of Joseph, used to be known as Nauvoo, Commerce, Venus, half-breed land. Well, okay, a couple of examples. At one point, Wilford Woodruff is riding in like a little buggy kind of thing, and he gets to the outskirts and he sees this beautiful farm. He gets off of his, his kind of buggy thing, and he goes out to see the farmer. And he says to the farmer, he says, I just couldn't pass by your farm today without stopping. He said, as I looked over your farm, He said, I don't even think the Garden of Eden could be as beautiful as I now see your farm today. At which point the farmer said, oh, thank you, Wilford. He said, I've just dedicated my farm as my memory of Joseph Smith. So, farm, shop, barn, house, all going up, and suddenly, city of Joseph is magnificent. Well, okay. Brigham Young then says, flee. In other words, get out of there. We're now off to the Rocky Mountains. How long does Wilford Woodruff live in his brick house? Oh, 35 days. Okay. How long does Heber C. Kimball live in his house? Oh, less than that. And you'd say, what did it matter to them? It mattered that they had left for literally generations their memory of Joseph. Now, okay, to show Wilford Woodruff again, because he's your best diary man. And he describes he's leaving his house, and he's taking out a few things in the wagon to go west. And as he does so, he's carrying a table and kind of drops it, and suddenly there's a dent on the floor. In other words, Okay, he says to the wife, wait in the wagon. He gets new wood. He puts the wood, fixes it. He goes out the front door. He leaves the door wide open. And his wife goes, what are you doing? We're trying to line up to be able to head west. And he said, this is my memory of Joseph. He said, someday someone may know that I lived here. And he said, but in my mind, I need to leave my memory perfect. So notice then the saints now head west. And when they headed west, some very prominent Latter-day Saints will stay behind now in city of Joseph. And you'd say, well, try and imagine if where you're living, if you learned that Turtle Bay, everybody had left and the places were free for the taking, would you stay in class and keep listening to me?
No, ma'am.
Okay, good. In other words, you would be, you'd be grabbing anybody's car, you'd be off, and you'd go, I'm going to take that whole reception area of Turtle Bay, that's gorgeous, or I'm going to claim, the swimming pools, whatever it is, or the golf course. Okay, so try and imagine, when the saints leave the brick city, all up and down the Mississippi River, people are rushing there. They'd like to live in a magnificent, perfect brick-story house than to live where they'd been living downriver. Well, the problem goes like this. Here come in new settlers. They don't like the name City of Joseph, right? Because they don't have any feelings about Joseph Smith. And so they change the name back to, anybody guess it? Nauvoo. Okay. And suddenly, they just feel like the luckiest guy in the world. It's like they just won a lottery. Suddenly, somebody, has their name on the will. They got an inheritance. It was this. They had no idea. Okay. Well, they move into town, all right. But, they hadn't built it. And sometimes when you don't build it and your money doesn't go into it, guess what? You don't take care of it. And, wow. You'd say, well, okay, you get that on the house, but Joseph had kind of an organization that everybody would give 1 day in 10, and they would clean out like the drainage ditches, so that they would kind of reclaim the swampland. And so all of a sudden, weeds start growing up. And remember that water that had been leaving the town and, suddenly you could use the land? All of a sudden it starts coming back. And what happens within 2 years? Nauvoo's a what? It's a swamp. It's back. And suddenly people are going, I don't feel well. I got something really strange. I got this fever. I've got the whatever. And, okay, all of a sudden 2 years later, they're gone. Well, staying behind will be Joseph's widow, Emma. She describes in 2 years, here come all these people to town. They changed the name back to Nauvoo, but within 2 years, in any neighborhood, a typical neighborhood then had about 10 houses. Here's your house on one side of the street, here's on the other. And she said within 2 years, only 2 houses of the 10 had anybody living in them. Okay, so what would happen in your neighborhood if suddenly there were all these empty houses? Would kids not play hide and go seek? You know, play ball, you know, suddenly a window's broken, oh, who cares? And then pretty soon the animals are in. And pretty soon grass is in. And, you know, the vines are in. The trees are starting to grow. And Emma said within 2 years, Nauvoo, that was called Nauvoo the Beautiful, is called Nauvoo the Blight. What does blight mean? Okay, it's like an eyesore. You know, you look at it and you're like, ah, you know, because the bricks are starting to fall down. And, you know, if you don't keep your roof going, you start to get holes in the roof. And I don't know, you know, everything is just Nauvoo the Blight. Okay, in the meantime, the saints, however, went west. And when they went west, you know, in their mind, what they had left behind was Nauvoo the Beautiful. And what would happen is that every time there was a fast and testimony meeting, during the time that Brigham's the president, the only people he allowed to bear their testimonies were those that had known Joseph and those that had built the city of Joseph. So suddenly, you know, and you'd say it's a difference across the nation. One part, Nauvoo is horrible. It looks horrible. They have disease. They have illness. Nobody wants to live there. And in Utah, you get this old guy is standing up saying, I built my memory of Joseph. And here's how many bricks. And, you know, I put in, oh, it was magnificent. So you kind of have, like, on one side, magical, wonderful, fantasy Nauvoo. What could be more beautiful than Nauvoo is what Utah talks about. But back in Nauvoo, they're going, oh, we don't even want to go to that part of the town. That part of the town is all destroyed. Well, okay, years pass. Okay, I'm going to cruise it. Okay, as years now pass, finally, it's the 20th century. And there's only a few people, well, there were actually 100 people, and they called them the last leaves on the tree. Now, over here in Hawaii, you never know what it's like to be the last leaf on the tree because you have such wonderful weather, there's leaves all the time. But where I come from, you start to look, say, October, November, the wind is blowing, the snows are coming, the ice is coming, and I can look out my kitchen window and I can see our maple tree. And as I see the maple tree, I go, which leaf will be the last leaf on the tree? Okay, so as a result, you mean the last one to go. By about the 20th century, there were 100 people who had built their magnificent house in the city of Joseph. And these 100 people become very, very important. You know, in some cultures, age is greatly valued. And you'd say, at this time in the church, age was greatly, greatly valued. And these people, every Sunday, they would have like a little chair for them, kind of like a little cushion, and they would sit up by the bishoprics in their wards. Because they would know that families, if we'd been alive back then, our parents would have put us in wagons so that we could shake the hand of the man or the woman who shook the hand of Joseph. Finally, the decision was made, you know, let's have secretaries following these old guys. And the secretaries, we're going to have them ask the old guys, come on, tell me anything else about Joseph.